welcome to this episode of Authentic Achievements, where I am beyond delighted to be joined by my good friend Lisa Ventura MBE. But before I introduce her to you, Lisa, welcome.
Hi Kim, it's great to be here, thank you.
Oh, it's great to have you here, and I'm so looking forward to sharing your journey and your story with our audience. But before we get started, let me tell them a little bit more about you. So Lisa's an award-winning cybersecurity specialist, a published writer and author, a keynote speaker. She's the founder of Cybersecurity Unity, a global community organization that's dedicated to bringing individuals and organizations together who actively work in cybersecurity to help combat the growing cyber threat. As a consultant, Lisa also works with cybersecurity leadership teams to help them work together more effectively and provide cybersecurity awareness and culture training and training on the benefits of hiring those who are neurodiverse. She has a specialist knowledge in the human factors of cybersecurity, cyberpsychology, neurodiversity, and AI in cyber, and is also co-founder of International Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day. And a great friend. Where do you fit it all in, Lisa? I mean, that's a lot of things to be involved with.
Absolutely, Kim, and it's something I'm asked a lot because there is so much that I do, and I pack a lot, into my, my days, my weeks, my months, and I think for me, really, it goes back around to 10 or so years ago because I was on a very, very different trajectory. So in 2013, I was expecting my first baby, and when I was about halfway through the pregnancy, he was diagnosed with quite a few things that were wrong with him in utero. So I knew I was prepared for the fact he would have significant disabilities and for being a mother that would have to give 24-hour round-the-clock care to my son when he was here. And I was prepared for that. I was all ready for it. But closer to his due date, he was in fact stillborn. And so I prepared for this one life, this life of being a 24 hours a day mother to my son. And then just as abruptly, I'm taken off that trajectory and I'm back onto another one. And what helped me heal, I think, from that was throwing myself into work after he was born and after we had the funeral and so on. And I didn't go on to have any other children because I was then diagnosed with a rare complication that meant that would be difficult to do. So I kind of just got my head around all this. And in fact, I posted this morning, funnily enough, on my LinkedIn, because having now gone through the what is a natural part of life, which is the menopause, those days are now, well behind me. So I guess for me, I just really threw myself into my work and really focused on that to, just give me something to do and just give me another focus, another pathway, another thing that I could, excel at and, something I could just really devote my time to. Because I'd failed so spectacularly on the motherhood front, I channeled everything into the career side of things. And so that's the kind of answer, I guess, as to how I fit it all in, because I don't have those commitments that many other people do. I don't have caring, commitments. I don't have children. So I have my dog Poppy, and she's a big part of my life and a big chunk of my life. But for me, that's why I focus everything into my career and do so much.
Amazing. And as you know, I'm so sorry for your loss and can't begin to imagine just what that must be like. I had my own miscarriage, but was then lucky to go on and have my little girl. So my heart goes out to you because I can only scratch the surface of what that must have been like. And can see that obviously that redirection to have something positive to focus on, and something where you can feel back in control of something. And I think when anything like that happens, we can see ourselves as failing at it, and yet we didn't fail. It just wasn't meant to be. But it's hard, isn't it, to be kind enough to ourselves to acknowledge that and find a way forward.
Exactly that, Kim, because the pressure on me on that front was absolutely immense, and not from my ex, because I had nothing but support there, but it was massive pressure from other areas of my life, in particular from my parents, who, you know, kept, when are you going to have a baby? When is it going? When are we going to be grandparents? You're leaving it too long. What's going on? Why is it not happening? And I'd actually also had 6 early miscarriages with my ex. And then after my son was stillborn, I went on to have another 4 early miscarriages. So it wasn't for the want of trying and having that pressure all the time from my parents of, when's it going to happen? And it was, it was immense, and that's what really led to that massive fear of failure and feeling like I'd completely failed to do the one thing we were put on this earth, to do, because I had all that significant, pressure of, when am I going to make them grandparents?
Yeah, I can empathise with that, having had my little girl late. I didn't think I could have children, and therefore spent all my life telling everybody I didn't want them, rather than being honest and admitting I really did want them, but it just wasn't happening for me. So I can understand on a level how that can really push you to focus on the things you can do, to focus on something that you can be in control of, and to really fill your time, I think, sometimes, to stop you having the time to have to think about it, or to be able to have those positives in. So tell me a bit more about your journey since then, because in that 10 years, I mean, you've packed a lot in.
Yeah, absolutely. Just quickly going back to something that you were saying then about filling up the time. That is so true, because there's a quote in one of my all-time favorite films, Bohemian Rhapsody, which is the biopic of Queen and Freddie Mercury, where there's a scene that Freddie's just had this massive over-the-top party, and he's on his own in his house, and there's a waiter there that he talks to, and the waiter says, "Oh, have your friends all left now?" And Freddie says, "Yeah, but they're not my friends, not really." And he said, and the waiter says, "Well, how come?" And Freddie says, "Well, they're just a distraction, really. Do they fill in the in-between moments? Because if they weren't there filling that time, life would just be really unbearable." And that really resonated with me. And that's been a big part of the 10 years or so that I've done since, I've lost my son. It's been all about filling in those in-between moments, when all that darkness, when all that pain, when all that trauma can come sort of bubbling back up to the surface. But in terms of my journey, it's been quite an interesting one, because I didn't plan or set out to actually enter the cybersecurity industry. It wasn't really a conscious choice, because I spent the first part of my career working with Chris Tarrant of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire fame. And I did that for a number of years. And when I felt I'd gone as far as I could with Chris, I then was thinking about my next career move. But at the time, my ex was really high up as an ethical hacker penetration tester. And I was always absolutely fascinated in the work that they did, and all the sort of human elements around hacking and cybersecurity. So I was exposed to the industry through their work for quite a long time. And then we went on to found Titania Limited, which is a cybersecurity software development company. And that was the point that I transitioned into the industry back in 2009. And then a few years later, in 2012, when we separated and subsequently divorced, I knew I wanted to stay within cyber. So I did just that. And then after I remarried and lost my son to stillbirth, I went on to work with BT and did some work on their Azure cyber product. I then branched out into the cybersecurity culture and awareness training side of things. And I've worked with many organizations to roll out cyber awareness and training programs for their workforce. And I then went on to found Cybersecurity Association, which is now rebranded as Cybersecurity Unity. I got asked to write for various trade publications and other publications, published a handful of books, and the latest one came out on International Women's Day, which was The Rise of the Cyber Women, Volume 3, which gives a voice to all the many amazing women in cybersecurity, and also talks about those that have non-linear pathways or journeys into cyber, which is very much something that happened to me. I speak at a lot of events. I also, as you said earlier, together along with Nat, we co-founded International Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day. I'm a judge for various cybersecurity awards. I sit on various boards as well. So I've really embraced it and really just got into as much as I can manage. And the pinnacle of which was being awarded an MBE in King Charles's first birthday honours list last year, which is something that is so surreal and still something I haven't got my head around then. I mean, we talk a lot about imposter syndrome. Goodness me, it went through the roof when I found out about that, I can tell you.
I can imagine, because it's in those moments, isn't it, where we achieve something that it really spikes the dial on the fact that we don't think that we should, even if everybody else around us is telling us that we've earned it, that we deserve it, that the impact that we're having, it's just recognition for that. There's it almost certainly for me, and from when we've chatted about it, it almost makes makes your internal voice want to scream even louder.
Absolutely.
Anything new. It shouldn't be there. And I know that's kind of that feeling, and we've both openly admitted that we've been sufferers for many years, was what drove us, wasn't it, to set up International Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day, to help start the debates, to have the conversation, because when you're in the throes of it, the one thing that you won't do is tell anybody. So they'll definitely know that you're an imposter because you share it. So you tend to hold it back even more, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, for me, I didn't really know that it had a name, or that there was something like that. I always had those feelings, no matter what I did, of I'm a fraud and I'm going to be found out at any second, or this wasn't meant for me, it was meant for somebody else, or even that fear of just not speaking up in meetings because of, I'm worried that if I did, I would be seen as, not knowing what on earth I'm talking about, or, and things like that. So it was quite an eye-opener when I realized that it was actually a real thing, and even more of an eye-opener when I realized how many people actually suffer from it, women and men alike across the board. And that definitely led me to looking at it, into studying it, and so on, and then led, of course, to us founding the day where we talk about it on April the 13th, and really open up that conversation so that people feel that they're not alone. Because for years I felt that I was alone because of it, and because I didn't have a name, or I didn't know what it was. That isolation feeling was really immense.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter how awful we talk to ourselves. It sounds so plausible, doesn't it, when you're in those moments where you're berating yourself on everything that hasn't gone well. And I think it is, that's part of why we're doing it, isn't it? Is to create that community, that safe space where it's okay to share that actually. And I know we've chatted about it before. It's not about overcoming it. It's about learning the coping mechanisms to get through it quicker, so that you can regain control, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's exactly how I like to reframe it, Kim. Rather than conquering it or overcoming it, I like to come at it from managing imposter syndrome, and putting things in place that work for you as an individual to help you manage it. Because like everything else, there's no one size fits all. And what works for me may not work for you, or may not work for somebody else. But what I can do, and what I'm really passionate about, is sharing my lived experience of it, and those examples where it's really hit me hard, especially when I was awarded my MBE, for example. So I've shared about that, because people will ask me, how do you feel about it? How did you feel when you got notified? And it's like I'm the biggest imposter on the planet, and that it wasn't meant for me. So
I can imagine that, because I think we when you say it out loud, when you say it to other people, you kind of can hear for yourself that sounds odd, can't you? I remember I remember winning nothing like an MBE, but winning an award and thinking, oh, if only they knew. If I'm just going to be found out. I was so bad I couldn't even bring the award home because I didn't feel I'd actually earned it. So it's still, I believe, in the office where it was given to me. And it wasn't because I wasn't grateful for it, but I didn't feel it belonged.
Yeah.
And when you kind of say that out loud to people, they're like, what would need to have been different for you to believe it? And the fact is, it's inside that needs to be different. It doesn't matter what anybody else does externally for you. It's how you can create the right strategies that work for you. And as you say, what works for one person isn't going to work for everybody. And also it might not work for every situation. So having lots of tools, lots of things that's going, okay, that's not working for me today, but maybe this can can really help in those moments of catching ourselves and saying, is this what I really want to think?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do I want to think, and how can I take the steps to get me there?
Absolutely. I mean, I have a myriad of different things that I use. One of the things I've been using recently actually came from something that you said to me, Kim, and I want to take the opportunity to say a massive thank you, because you said to me once that a lot of the things that we say to ourselves, and including imposter syndrome and that critical self-talk, that negative self-talk that we say to ourselves, would we say that to other people? Would we say that to our children? No, we absolutely wouldn't. The way we talk to ourselves, you're so right about this, Kim. The way we talk to ourselves is not how we would talk to other people. And that's really worked for me in terms of reframing those thoughts. So when they start to coming in, I always, think back to when you told me that and think, no, I wouldn't say this to other people. Why on earth am I saying this to myself?
Oh, I'm so glad it worked for you. And it's so true, isn't it? And I've said things to myself that I wouldn't say to another living person.
Yeah.
Even somebody I didn't like, I wouldn't be as cruel as I've been to myself. And so, as I shared with you, when I find myself saying that, I go, would I say this to Scarlett, who's is my North Star? And I wouldn't. So I now try and say to myself what I'd say to her. So I think about, if it were her, what would I say? Right now, say that to myself. Because it just helps jolt me into that. Imagine her little face if I ever said some of the things that I've said to myself, and it's heartbreaking to think what they would say. But yet we can be so cruel with ourselves, can't we?
We can. And following on from that, I had another realization recently as well. And as you know, I've done a lot of research into narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder, and those with narcissistic personality traits. And the reason for that is because I think that many people that bully and abuse others in the workplace, in particular, and in personal life and so on, they can often have narcissistic personality traits, if not the full-blown disorder. So something else that I've realized is that narcissists will have no filter. They will say those things to other people, and they have no consequences or no empathy, and they're just totally devoid of it. They just don't have the faintest clue how what they're saying impacts and affects other people. And that was the realization that I came to was they do say those things to other people, and they have no filter. They have no consequences of doing that. And that was a real light bulb moment for me, because it's like, it's part of their DNA. They'll never change, and they can't help it. And from a very young age, I heard a lot of critical, things aimed at me from my own upbringing that have really stuck with me. And it took years and years and years to really shed those negative beliefs and those things that I've been told, and that pressure to fit in and dress nicely and be this certain way, and don't let the side down, because that was always, you better behave yourself today because we don't want you letting the side down, and you better dress nicely, we don't want you letting the side down. And that's all I heard. But I don't think it was my parents' fault. That's in their DNA. That's what they like. And they had no filter, no consequence, or no empathy to be able to understand how that affected me.
Yeah. And I think often it's because they've been hurt that way themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that from a excuse the behavior, but just understand.
No, you're right. Yeah.
I was saying this to Scott the other day. She had a little boy who was mean to her, and she came home and we chatted about how she felt and obviously went through her emotions. And then we chatted about what might be going on in his world. And she was like, "What do you mean, Mummy?" And I said, "Well, people don't hurt us on purpose. They're usually dealing with their own pain, and we're collateral damage. They don't actually consider us in the slightest." I said, "So maybe next time, ask how he is." And she came back the next day. She was like, "Mummy, he was mean to me again." And I said, "Oh, was he, my darling?" And she said, "Yeah, but I said to him, 'Are you okay? Would you like a cuddle?'" And I said, "Oh, okay." What happened then? And she went, "He said, 'Yes, please.'" She said, "And he's been really kind to me for the rest of the day." And I was like, because we just don't know. People learn this behavior. So they've had to have seen it, just like we've learned our behavior, and we have to see it. And then we can choose whether or not we do something about it. But I think, if we can try and start to understand the causes, and for me, one of my big eye-openers was when I stopped trying to get empathy from somebody who wasn't able to give it. Actually, they were dealing with their own pain. And so when you shared the pain they were putting you through, it just frustrated them, because they were like, "Well, I'm already in pain, and now you're making me deal with your pain." It's like, well, my pain comes as a result of yours. But it was those parts going, "Oh, okay, I need to understand where I can help fix my pain without needing to get that fixed from you." And that was, for me, where I started on my journey to kind of really understand, why do we do this to ourselves? Where does it come from? And how do we unpick the beliefs that we've created that usually have come from our childhood?
Yeah, absolutely.
Reinforce them as we've gone through our adult life, because they become like our blueprint, don't they? Until we work on them, until we understand what they are, and then we can create better ones that serve us better.
Absolutely. And also that we decide, or we make that decision, that we're going to break that generational cycle, and that it stops right here, right now with me, so that I don't go on to hurt any other subsequent generations. And I think that that's something that many of the previous generations, they just didn't do. It was all buttoned, sort of buttoned up. It was all that, stiff upper lip. We don't, show our feelings. We don't talk about our feelings. We don't, and that's got to go somewhere. So it's going to overspill and go out to everybody else. But there also does come a point where another thing I've learned is you just have to know when to just go, no, and walk away from it, because the impact that kind of behavior has on your own well-being, on your own, self-talk, it's beyond toxic sometimes. And it's just at that point where no matter who it is, you've just got to take a stand and go, toxic is toxic, and I am not going to engage in this for my own well-being anymore. And it's really hard to do, because when I did that and started to set healthy boundaries, my goodness, it escalated in ways that I would never have imagined. And this was from people who are professed to love me more than anything in the world as well. But I took that stamp. It's like, no, I'm setting healthy boundaries here. The fact that they're being pushed against so much really does show me how boundaryless I was. And that spilled over into everything. So I would take on everything at work. I would reply to things out of hours. I would be up at 3 a.m. sorting something out if it needed, doing. I was totally boundaryless in every aspect, in every area of my life. And now that I've put those boundaries in place, life is just so much better. But it's hard. It's really hard to do.
It is, and I so empathise with that, because I was a lifelong people pleaser and had no boundaries for myself at all in any direction. And actually, it's really hard when you start putting them in. But for me, that was my first breakthrough of demonstrating some level of self-care. and
Yeah.
some level of self-love. And for me, that felt like a real triumphant breakthrough, that it was like,
Yep.
actually, I am worth being able to set a boundary. That doesn't make me a bad person to not be able to take on everybody else's challenges all of the time. I'll do whatever I can to help anybody, but I also have to now help myself as
Yeah.
well, because
Yeah.
I think for me the saying that really hit home was, you can't pour from an empty cup. And it wasn't until I realized the cup became really empty that it was like, okay, I need to do something now to balance that, because if not, I can't be there to be a good mum for Scarlett, or to be a good friend for my friends, or to be a good colleague, to be helpful anywhere, because you can't constantly run on empty, can you?
Absolutely. And the analogy for me that's very similar was, I did a course long ago to become a neurodiversity in the workplace trainer, because I myself am neurodivergent, was diagnosed with autism and ADHD. And the analogy that came up during the course was that when you're on an airplane, if there's an incident and the oxygen masks come down, they always say to you to get your own oxygen mask on first before you help other people get their oxygen masks on. And that really hit home with me. So it's very similar to, you can't pour from an empty cup. And it's similar in that you have to get your own oxygen mask on, prioritize yourself before you can help other people with their oxygen masks. And it's so true.
It's so true. And that was one that I never really understood for a long time, which is a bit ridiculous, because I know surely I want to put Scarlett's on first, until I thought about, and what next? So what if I get Scarlett's on and then I can't get my own on, and then she's on her own, and where would she go? Whereas if I get mine on, I'm better able to help her. So it was actually one of those analogies that really does resonate, because for years I've got, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. But that just demonstrates quite how far I was down the whole people pleaser piece. But I hadn't done the next step to realise that in not doing it, I was actually going to put her in more harm, not in a safer space. And it was once you make that breakthrough, I think that it really helps start to form a new way of thinking, doesn't it? And a new path forward. So you've already done so very much, but what would you say has been the greatest lesson you've learned so far?
Oh gosh, I've got a few, but I had a particularly traumatic experience about 2 or 3 years ago, when somebody who was helping me get the UK Cybersecurity Association off the ground, actually in the end targeted me with a huge campaign of bullying and abuse, and not just because of aimed at me. It was actually also aimed at others within the organization. This individual then went on to target my accountant, the solicitor who was involved, and it only stopped when it was reported to the police and the police got involved. So I think that the biggest lesson for me from that is that I was done with cybersecurity. I was coming out the industry. I was going to close the association down. I was not going to have anything to do with cybersecurity ever again. And for a little while, I did go into logistics, and I worked for Logistics UK for a while. And I guess for me, the biggest lesson is time. It's a cliche, but time really does heal all wounds. And that's one thing I've learned, is to just not straight away come out of something or dismiss something out of hand like that, because after a while it was, oh, I miss cyber, I want to go back into doing it. And then, eventually I did. So I think for me is not letting bullies or abusers, if you are subject to that, win in any way. And as you said earlier, it could well be that they're dealing with other stuff in their lives that it's spilling out, into how they're treating you. But recognize that it's not you in any way, shape, or form. And having had that experience throughout my entire lifetime, I can absolutely say it said nothing whatsoever about me, but said everything about them. So it is not you if you are the target of bullies and abusers. And that's my biggest lesson, because for years it must be me. What can I change? What can I do? I've got a whole load of self-help books over there that I was reading cover to cover, looking for that answer of how can I change so that I won't be bullied or abused or targeted? And it was never me, Kim. It was never about me. It was all about those who chose to do it, and it said everything about them, but nothing about me.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah. I always say to Scarlett, we don't get to choose how somebody behaves towards us, but we do get to choose how we respond.
That's
And
right.
it's our
Yeah.
response that we have control over.
Yeah.
And that response can be walk away.
Yeah.
You don't have to stay there.
Yeah.
If you're not, if you're not being treated well. And I say that now, having not walked away, but I should have done on more than one occasion in my life, and continued to be the dog to kick.
Yeah.
And it's like, actually, once you learn that piece on healthy boundaries, and once you realize it actually isn't about you, all you can do is be the best version of yourself every day. And I set myself the goal every day to be a better version of myself than I was yesterday. But that's all I can control. I can't control anything else. And that was quite liberating once I got to that piece, which was, I'm never going to be perfect, and that's okay. But that doesn't allow me to not be the best I can be.
Yeah.
But before, I hadn't realized that they are mutually exclusive. So they don't have to do both to get there. So I love that you've got those lessons as well. What if you could go back and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Again, going back to the bullying and abuse that I experienced, I would absolutely, say, don't take it to heart when you're targeted. Because, as I said, I absolutely did. I was convinced it was all me, that it was all my fault, that I must have done or said something or caused them to act in that way towards me. And I would also say as well, another piece of advice is, go for those things. Fortune favors the bold. If there's an opportunity or there's something you want, ask for it, send that email, make that phone call. For a long time, I would always be, oh, better not do that, or I'm not quite qualified for that, or I'm not quite, right for that. And there are times when I wish I'd just sent that email and asked, or picked up the phone, or whatever it was. So just it's real cliche again, but just do it, because you never know where it might lead.
It's true, isn't it? It was Mark Twain that said, in 20 years, it won't be the things you did that you regret, it'll be the things that you didn't do.
Yeah.
I try to remind myself of that when I'm procrastinating, finding a million reasons why it really isn't the right thing to do. But actually, when you've just gone for it, when you've just done it, that's usually when, as you say, opportunity does favour the bold. So, Lisa, as we come towards an end, what's next for you?
Gosh, there are still things I really want to do. So I'm working at the moment on a couple of book ideas that I want to develop, because I've had my books on women in cybersecurity and so on, but I want to focus on a couple of other things that are quite close to my heart. And who knows, eventually I'd like to perhaps even do a doctorate or something like that. I would love to add that as well to my list, and perhaps do something more within the realms of cyberpsychology. So yeah, I'm not done. There's a lot more that I want to do.
And I have every faith you will achieve every single bit of it. And I look forward to having you back on to share with us how you're progressing with that. So how can people get in touch with you?
I'm quite active on LinkedIn and Twitter. My tag is Cyber Geek Girl. You can also find me on the Cybersecurity Unity website, which is csu.org.uk, and of course the International Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day website, which is iisad.org. Please do join us on the 13th of April. We're going to really open up the conversation on that day about imposter syndrome. So do check the site and see what we've got planned.
Amazing. And yeah, absolutely do get involved. And all of the details of how to get in touch with Lisa will be in the show notes below. So if you didn't get a chance to write any of that down, don't worry, they'll be right behind here getting in touch. Lisa, it's been a delight as always. Thank you so much for coming on and being so open and sharing your journey, because I think in sharing our lived experience, we help other people realize that they're not alone. And I commend your compassion for others and your dedication to leaving things better than you found them.
Thank you, Kim. It's been a real pleasure to be here today.
Thanks. Until next time.